Some people don't feel lonely when they're alone. They feel relieved. Relieved when plans get cancelled. Relieved when messages stop coming. Relieved when the world finally quiets down and they can breathe again. And because of that, they're often misunderstood. They're told they're antisocial, that they're avoidant, that they're running away from people. But what if that interpretation is wrong? What if preferring solitude isn't a rejection of others, but a psychological response shaped by experience? Stay with me, because in this video, we're going to unpack a truth that rarely gets discussed honestly. For many people, choosing to be alone isn't about disliking connection. It's about feeling safer without it. There's a particular kind of calm that comes with solitude, not the numb kind, but the kind where your nervous system finally stops scanning the room. No expectations, no emotional guessing games, no pressure to perform, explain, or adjust yourself in real time, just space. And once someone experiences that relief, it leaves a mark. They start noticing how different they feel around people, how conversations, even pleasant ones, carry a subtle weight, how being on for too long drains something they can't easily name. So they return to being alone, not dramatically, not bitterly, but instinctively. From the outside, it can look like preference, like independence, like emotional self-sufficiency. But internally, something else is often happening. Because the psychology of people who prefer being alone is not rooted in superiority, coldness, or detachment. It's rooted in regulation, in protection, in a mind that has learned, sometimes very early, that solitude feels more predictable than connection. And once the brain associates aloneness with peace, it begins to organize life around preserving it. What most people don't realize is this, that preference didn't appear out of nowhere. It was learned, and understanding how it was learned changes the way we understand everything that follows. The preference for being alone rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't begin with a declaration like, "I don't need people." It begins with small, almost reasonable choices, choosing to stay in rather than go out. Not because you hate the event, but because you know how tired you'll feel afterward. Letting messages sit for a while, not out of indifference, but because responding feels like opening a door you're not sure you have the energy to walk through. Enjoying plans in theory, then feeling an unexpected sense of relief when they fall through. At first, these moments feel like self-care, and sometimes they are. But over time, a pattern forms. You start structuring your life around minimizing emotional friction. You become selective with your attention, your time, your presence. You learn exactly how much interaction you can tolerate before something inside you starts to tighten. This isn't about disliking people. It's about managing stimulation. For many people who prefer being alone, social environments are neurologically expensive. Every conversation requires reading tone, facial expression, subtext. Every interaction asks for emotional calibration. When to speak, when to hold back, how much of yourself is appropriate to reveal. And when you've learned, consciously or not, that small missteps can lead to discomfort, misunderstanding, or subtle rejection, your nervous system adapts. It begins to associate solitude with regulation. When you're alone, your body softens, your thoughts slow down, your identity feels less fragmented. There's no need to monitor yourself, no need to anticipate reactions, no need to explain why you are the way you are. So the brain takes notes. It learns that aloneness equals safety, and safety, once discovered, becomes something the mind fiercely protects. That's why this preference doesn't feel like avoidance from the inside. It feels like alignment, like finally choosing environments where you don't have to brace yourself. But what often goes unnoticed is this. When a coping strategy works too well, the mind stops distinguishing between rest and retreat. And that subtle shift matters more than most people realize. The desire to be alone rarely begins as a preference. More often, it begins as a lesson. Long before someone learns the language to say, "I'm more comfortable on my own," their nervous system has already been taking notes. It might have started in subtle ways. being the child who was a little quieter than the others, the one who noticed tension before it was spoken, the one who learned early that attention could turn uncomfortable very quickly. Maybe you were praised for being mature, independent, low maintenance. Those labels sound positive, but to a developing mind, they often translate into something else. Don't need too much. Don't take up too much space. Don't make things complicated. Or maybe it wasn't praise, but unpredictability. Inconsistent emotional responses from adults. Affection that came and went. Moments where opening up led to being misunderstood, dismissed, or subtly shamed. Nothing dramatic enough to point at. Nothing obvious enough to explain. Just enough to teach you that being inward was safer than being exposed. Psychologists refer to this as social learning. The brain observes emotional outcomes and quietly adjusts behavior to reduce risk. So the child learns, it's better to process things alone. It's safer not to rely too much on others. I can handle things myself. These aren't conscious beliefs. They're survival strategies. As years pass, these strategies harden into personality traits. You become self-contained, reflective, comfortable in your inner world. And from the outside, it looks like strength, but internally, the preference for solitude is doing more than offering peace. It's preventing overwhelm. It's reducing uncertainty. It's protecting you from emotional variables you learned not to trust. This is why simply putting yourself out there often feels wrong to people like you. It's not resistance, it's memory. Your nervous system remembers what once felt unsafe, even if your conscious mind can't name a single moment where things went wrong. And so solitude becomes more than comfort. It becomes continuity, a place where nothing unexpected happens and nothing needs to be defended. When you spend enough time alone, something subtle begins to happen. Solitude stops being just an environment. It becomes a system. At first, it feels like relief. Inside your own space, you can think clearly. You don't have to translate yourself. You don't have to soften your reactions or adjust your tone. You can process emotions fully, without interruption. And that inner space becomes familiar, comfortable, predictable. So when something happens during the day, a strange interaction, a moment of discomfort, an emotional reaction you don't fully understand, you don't reach outward, you bring it inward. You replay conversations, you analyze pauses, you re-express what you meant to say to yourself. Not because you're anxious, but because thinking feels safer than sharing. Over time, your internal dialogue grows richer than your external one. You begin having full conversations in your head, explaining yourself, defending yourself, reassuring yourself. Solitude gives you control. Inside your mind, nothing surprises you. No one interrupts. No one misunderstands your intent. But something important is missing. There's no external feedback, no correction, no reflection, no moment where someone responds in a way you didn't anticipate. So your inner world starts filling in those responses on its own. And it doesn't always fill them kindly. A neutral look becomes disapproval. Silence becomes judgment. Distance becomes rejection, even when no rejection actually occurred. This is how solitude quietly shifts. It stops being a place to rest and starts becoming the primary place where emotional life happens. Not because you chose isolation, but because it felt easier than risking misalignment. From the outside, it still looks healthy, like introspection, like independence. But internally, the balance has changed. You're no longer using solitude to recharge for connection. You're using it to replace connection altogether. And the longer this inner world goes unchallenged, the more convincing it becomes. Not because it's accurate, but because it's uninterrupted. There's a reason solitude feels more natural to you than it does to others. When you spend time alone, you don't get bored. You go inward. You reflect. You notice patterns. You think in layers rather than fragments. Many people who prefer being alone develop a heightened sensitivity to emotional nuance. Not because they're socially active, but because they've spent years observing from a distance. You notice when someone's energy shifts, when a laugh feels forced, when a conversation is staying light to avoid something heavier underneath. You can sense when people are performing versions of themselves, and you instinctively step back from interactions that feel hollow or transactional. This creates depth, but depth changes the way you relate to people. While others bond through frequency, shared routines, repeated proximity, casual interaction, you bond through meaning. You're not looking for constant connection, you're looking for resonance. And when resonance isn't there, you don't force it, you wait. From the inside, this waiting feels intentional, selective, even self-respecting. But from the outside, it often reads very differently. Your silence looks like distance. Your restraint looks like disinterest. Your carefulness looks like emotional unavailability. People don't always interpret depth correctly. They assume you're uninterested when you're actually discerning. They assume you're detached when you're actually cautious. They assume you don't need connection because you don't chase it. So interactions thin out, not through conflict, not through rejection, but through quiet misinterpretation. And the more this happens, the more solitude begins to feel not just preferable, but practical. Why invest energy where you're likely to be misunderstood? Why speak when listening feels safer? Why engage halfway when you're wired for something whole? The cost of depth is not loneliness, it's invisibility. And invisibility over time has consequences most people don't anticipate. At some point, without any clear decision being made, something shifts. You don't stop valuing connection. You don't decide people aren't worth it. You don't wake up one day and choose isolation. It happens more quietly than that. You choose solitude because it feels easier today, then again tomorrow. Then again the next time something feels uncertain, draining, or misaligned. And slowly, those choices stack. What once felt like preference begins to feel like momentum. You become less practiced at initiating, less comfortable reaching out, less certain about where you fit in someone else's life. Not because your social ability disappeared, but because it hasn't been exercised. The mind is efficient. It strengthens what it uses and softens what it doesn't. So as solitude becomes your default state, connection begins to feel less intuitive. You hesitate longer before responding. You second-guess invitations instead of declining them directly. You assume others are busy, uninterested, or already connected elsewhere. And each assumption feels reasonable on its own, but together they quietly narrow your world. Your circle doesn't collapse, it thins. Conversations become occasional, check-ins become rare, shared experiences become memories rather than habits. This is where many people get confused. From the inside, nothing feels wrong. You're functioning, you're stable, you're at peace, most of the time. But something subtle is missing. There's no one you consistently share your inner life with. No one who sees your thinking evolve in real time. No one whose presence challenges your assumptions about yourself. Solitude has stopped being something you return to. It has become the place you stay. And when that happens, the mind adapts again. It lowers expectations. It rationalizes distance. It reframes absence as independence. Not because it's healthier, but because it's familiar. And familiarity, even when it costs us something, feels safer than uncertainty. This is the part that often goes unspoken, because it doesn't feel dramatic enough to name. You're not surrounded by conflict. You're not in the middle of a fallout. You're not avoiding people out of bitterness or resentment. You just don't have many close connections anymore. Not because you pushed everyone away, but because no one ever quite moved close enough to stay. The phone stays quiet unless you reach for it first. Weeks pass without real conversation. Milestones happen internally instead of being shared. And when you stop and notice it, the realization lands gently, but heavily. There's no one you'd naturally call a friend. This moment doesn't come with panic. It comes with confusion. Because from the inside, it doesn't feel like failure. You're capable, thoughtful, emotionally aware. You didn't lose people through chaos. You lost them through drift, through choosing peace over friction, through waiting for depth instead of building momentum, through assuming absence meant neutrality rather than erosion. And society doesn't give language for this kind of experience. People assume friendlessness means rejection, awkwardness, or social incompetence. But your experience doesn't match that narrative. You didn't end up here because you dislike people. You ended up here because solitude felt safer, until it quietly became the only place connection lived. And the hardest part? Others often misread this state. They assume you prefer it this way, that you're independent, self-sufficient, unbothered. So no one checks in too closely. No one pushes past your calm exterior. No one realizes that what looks like contentment is often just adaptation. And when you finally ask yourself whether this is what you wanted, the answer isn't simple, because solitude still feels regulating, still feels familiar, but now it carries weight, a quiet sense that something human has been missing for longer than you realized. Here's the part that matters most, and the part that often brings relief when people finally hear it. Nothing about this path means something went wrong with you. Your preference for solitude didn't come from coldness. Your distance didn't come from arrogance. Your lack of close connections didn't come from failure. It came from adaptation. Your mind learned what helped you feel regulated, safe, and intact, and it organized your life around preserving that state. Solitude wasn't a flaw. It was a solution. But solutions, when held onto too tightly, can quietly turn into limits. Not because they stop working, but because they start replacing something they were never meant to substitute. Connection isn't rebuilt by force. It isn't rebuilt by suddenly becoming more social or pushing yourself into spaces that feel wrong. It begins with awareness, with noticing when peace has become isolation, when independence has become invisibility, when self-sufficiency has quietly erased the expectation that someone might show up for you. Reconnection doesn't require a dramatic transformation. It starts with small interruptions to the pattern, letting yourself respond instead of retreat, allowing curiosity instead of assumption, permitting someone to know you a little more than feels efficient, and most importantly, releasing the belief that the way you adapted disqualifies you from closeness. It doesn't. People who learn to be alone deeply often bring the most presence, loyalty, and emotional clarity into connection when they finally feel safe enough to build it again. If any part of this video felt uncomfortably familiar, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect, or share, if you're willing. At what point did solitude stop being a choice and start becoming the only place you felt settled? You can leave that in the comments. Not as a confession, but as recognition. You're not the only one carrying this story quietly. If this kind of psychological exploration helps you understand yourself more clearly, consider subscribing, not for content, but for continuity. And if you're ready to go deeper into what happens after solitude becomes a long-term state, the next video, Psychology of People That Have No Friends, continues this exact story. It doesn't judge where you are, it explains how people arrive there, and it might give language to something you've been living with for a long time, without words.